Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah. Shalom, shalom to the whole house of Yahshua, all 12 tribes worldwide, wherever your feet are touching the soil on this evening, on this Layla. Shalom to the elder brother, Yehuda, or commonly called Judah. Shalom to the younger brother, Ephraim, commonly called Ephraim. Shalom to the former stranger, the former foreigner, who was formerly estranged from the everlasting covenant, but having received the Ruach of adoption, the Ruach HaKadosh, the Ruach of the Mashiach, and whereby becoming adopted sons, and whereby being engrafted into the olive tree, who is Yahusha, who is Yahshua, and whereby becoming fellow citizens of Yahshua, and whereby now becoming privy to the same everlasting covenant and promise and inheritance that was given to Yahshua and to Yahshua alone. Shalom to you. Shalom, peace and blessings. Shalom and barakut to you and your entire house, wherever your feet are touching the soil on this yom. Shalom, shalom to you, to all 12 tribes, the whole house of Yahshua worldwide. Shalom to you on this evening. Shalom. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. To those of you who are on YouTube, we're grateful that the Master has sent you once more to share in Yahuwah's Remnant Midweek Gathering. We are appreciative and we do not take this lightly. This is a great work and a great responsibility that the Master has given us, and we do not take it lightly. And we are grateful that he has entrusted you to us. If you who are on YouTube would, again, desire to join us live, our contact information is in the channel description. It is in the channel description. Nevertheless, the Master has a word for his people. It is a solemn word, and as I speak to you, as you're listening under the sound of my voice, I'm solemn. I'm solemn this evening, but I pray that the Master would allow me to come out of this because he has told me, he has spoken and said that many are called, few are chosen. Not all will come. Do not mourn. Do not mourn. Do not mourn. So I pray that the Master would stir up a fire in my belly and would not allow me to be solemn this evening, because this is indeed a solemn word, but that he would allow me to proclaim this word, to cry aloud and spare not, to declare to the nation of Yahshua their sins, and to cause them to come out of darkness into his marvelous light. Indeed, the Master has said that judgment must first come to the house of Yahshua, and then unto the nations. Master has been speaking through his servant. He has spoken the word ketubah, which is to allude to a marriage covenant. And he has spoken the words that the house of Yahshua must repent. The house of Yahshua must repent, because a time of judgment is soon to come upon this earth, where he's getting ready to unleash his punishing rod, his chastening rod, to chastise his stiff-necked son, in order to turn his stiff-necked son from unrighteousness back to righteousness. Afterwards, the judgment of the nations will come, when the Master Yahushua himself comes with a sword and will consume the beast and the false prophet with a fire that will proceed from his mouth. The judgment of the nations will also come in the second resurrection. It will also come then, where some will arise, will resurrect to everlasting life, and some will resurrect to everlasting punishment. But he has sent his servant by. He has sent his messenger by to speak to whomever has eyes to see, and ears to hear, and a heart to understand, and a sensitivity as to the season and the time that we are in. He sent his servant by to warn whomever would hear, whomever would see, and whomever has a heart to receive. He has been speaking through the mouth of his servant leading up to the Feast of Weeks, leading up to Shavuot, preparing his people for Shavuot, which could and may very well be. Understand my words. I said which could and may be very well be. I have not said it will be, but which could and may very well be the earth's very last chance to teshuvah, to repent, before the proverbial floodwaters, before judgment comes upon this earth. We are in a peculiar time. We're in a peculiar season. We are in unprecedented times. The earth has never seen the times that we are in and the times that we're getting ready to enter into. And so he has sent his servant by to warn whomever has eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to understand, to prayerfully stir up an urgency within them, a fire within them, to seek the Master with all of their heart, mind, and strength in this season while he may be found by them. And so he has laid the foundation through his servant with respect to Shavuot. So we're not going to recapture that. We're not going to go back over that. If you're on YouTube and you don't know by now, you're going to have to go back about perhaps 4 or 5 videos to establish this foundation. But I'm not going to speak about that this night, because coming this first day, coming this Sunday, we are 1 week away from Shavuot. We are 1 week away from the marriage date. Coming this first day of the week, this Sunday, we are 1 week away from the marriage date. So I do not have any more time to go back over and relay the foundation. I'm not going to do that. You're going to have to go back to perhaps 4 or 5 videos to get an understanding now of the Feast of Weeks and Shavuot, as the Master has laid the foundation through his servant. So I'm not going to even speak of it now. I'm not going to even speak of that. You should already now have an understanding. And you should already now, if the Master has placed an urgency in you, you should already have that sense of urgency. And that's one thing that he cannot proclaim through his servant. I cannot proclaim urgency. I cannot proclaim hunger. That must come from within. That's a personal thing. It must come from within. It cannot come from me. It cannot come from me. And so this night, if you're taking notes, this evening, if you're taking notes, the title of this message is Let the Dead Bury the Dead. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. The Master utters these words in Matthew, or Matat Yahu, the 8th chapter. Matat Yahu, the 8th chapter. What verses, little one?
19 to 22.
Verses 19 through 22. Let us go there and read the Master's words and get an understanding of what it is the Master is saying here and what it is the Master wants us to understand in this season and how that applies to the Feast of Weeks and Shavuot, which this coming Sunday, or this coming first day, is 1 week away. 1 week away. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Matthew chapter 8, Matat Yahu chapter 8, verses 19 through 22. Verses 19 through 22. Matthew, Matat Yahu chapter 8, verses 19 through 22. Beginning at verse 19. Come on, read for us, little one.
And a certain scribe, having come near, said to him, Teacher, I shall follow you wherever you go. And Yahushua said to him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the heaven nest, but the Son of Adam has nowhere to lay his head. And another of his taught ones said to him, Master, first let me go and bury my father. But Yahushua said to him, Follow me, and leave the dead to bury the dead.
Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Follow me. and leave the dead for the dead to bury. Follow me. Follow me and leave the dead to bury the dead. To gain an understanding here of what the Master is saying, we must go to the foundation. We must go to Torah. Indeed, all things according to Torah. The Master always taught according to Torah. He never taught contrarily to Torah. But if you don't have an understanding of the Torah, then you won't understand the Master's words. In the same way, if you don't have an understanding of the Torah, you will not understand the taught one's words, the ambassadors, or what the nations call the apostles' words. You will not understand their words if you don't have an understanding, a foundation in the Torah. And so to gain an understanding of what the Master, of what thus says Yahuwah to his people in this season, with respect to letting the dead bury the dead, you come and you follow me. We must go to the Torah. Turn now to Bamatba, Numbers chapter 19. Bamatba, Numbers chapter 19. Bamatba, Numbers chapter 19. Bamatba, Numbers chapter 19. He says, you let the dead bury the dead. You come follow me. So here there is a clear separation, a clear distinction and a clear separation. The operative word here is separation. The operative word is separation. And here there is a clear distinction and a clear separation. He says, you let the dead bury the dead. You let the dead bury the dead. But you come and you follow me. You come and you follow me. All things according to the Torah. Let's see what the Torah has to say about this. But Matbah chapter 19, Numbers chapter 19, in its entirety, beginning at verse 1. Come on, read for us, little one.
And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, this is the law of the Torah, which Yahuwah has commanded, saying.
This is the law of the Torah, which Yahuwah has commanded, saying. The Torah is eternal, all things according to the Torah. But you must understand that the Torah is a compilation of childlike instructions given to children to teach them about deeper spiritual matters that will save their lives. To teach them about deeper spiritual matters that will save their lives. This is the Torah. Come on, read.
Speak to the children of Yasharal, that they bring you a red heifer.
That they bring you a red heifer, read.
A perfect one.
A perfect one.
In which there is no blemish.
In which there is no blemish.
And on which a yoke has never come.
And on which a yoke has never come.
And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest.
And you shall give it to Eleazar the Kahan, read.
And he shall bring it outside the camp.
And he shall bring it outside the camp.
And shall slay it before him.
And shall slay it before him.
And Eleazar the priest shall take some of his blood with his finger and sprinkle some of his blood 7 times toward the front of the tent of appointment. And the heifer shall be burned before his eyes. He burns his hide and his flesh and his blood and its dung. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet and throw them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. The priest shall then wash his garments and shall bathe his body in water, and afterward come into the camp. But the priest is unclean until evening, and he who is burning it washes his garments in water, and shall bathe his body in the water, and is unclean until evening. And a clean man shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and shall place them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Yasharal, for the water for uncleanness. It is for cleansing from crime.
It is for cleansing from sin. Read.
And he who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his garments and is unclean until evening.
Is unclean until evening. Read.
And it shall be a law forever to the children of Yasharal.
And it shall be a law forever, Aulam, to the children of Yasharal. Read.
And to the stranger who sojourns in their
and
midst.
to the stranger who sojourns in their midst. Read.
He who touches the dead of any human being.
Come on, hear him, hear him, hear him. He who touches the dead of any human being, read.
Is unclean for 7 days.
Is unclean for 7 days. Is unclean for 7 days. Here, Here, read. Continue to read.
He is to cleanse himself with the water on the third day, and on the seventh day he is clean.
Read.
But if he does not cleanse himself on the third day, then on the seventh day he is not clean. Anyone who touches the dead of a human being,
yes,
and does not clean himself,
yes,
defiles the dwelling place of Yahuwah.
Yes.
And that being shall be cut off from Yasharal.
And that being shall be cut off from Yasharal. If any being touches a dead human body. Now you should already know that again, the Torah is a compilation of childlike instructions given to children to teach them about deeper spiritual matters. The dead represents the unclean. The dead represents sin. The dead represents sin. But what else does it represent? It represents separation. It represents separation from the master. It represents separation from Yahuwah. Thus, when someone touched a dead thing, when they touched a dead human body, they had to come without the camp for 7 days, outside of the presence of Yahuwah, who dwelt in the midst of the people, whose dwelling place was in the midst of the people. He had to be separate and separated, showing us how it is sin, how it is the touching of dead works that separates us from the master. But what else does this say? What else is the master trying to show us here with the touching of dead things, with the touching of a dead human body? A dead human body is a lifeless thing. Yes, it is. It is a lifeless thing. It has no life in it. It has no breath in it. It has no ruach in it. It is separate from Yahuwah. Yes, it is. It is separate from him because it has no life. It has no breath. It has no ruach in him. I'm not talking about the breath you breathe. No, no, no. The master has been laying this foundation for a long time. If he has not breathed his breath in you, you are dead. You are dead and you are without the camp. You are a dead thing. You are separated from him. You are separated from him. And so the master has said, you let the dead bury the dead, but you come and you follow me. Follow who? Follow Yahusha. Who is Yahusha? Yahusha is ruach. Yahusha is breath. Yahusha is life. You come and you follow me. And you quit touching dead stuff. Many of you think that you have his breath, but you do not. You're dead. You're separate from the master. You're hard and you're puffed up and you're prideful, thinking that you already have his breath, but you do not. You do not. You're without the camp. You're a dead thing. Anyone who does not have the breath of life or ruach in them, they are dead. They are dead. So he is saying, come and follow me. Because if you touch dead things, if you touch sin, then you too are dead. You two are dead and you two are separate from me. You do not have my ruach. You do not have my breath. He sent his servant by within the past 2 messages to speak to his people, to whomever would have eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to understand that we must wash, that we must cleanse ourselves of sin, of dead things, so that we can be filled, so that we can receive the breath of life, so that we can no longer be dead. So that we will no longer be dead. Many are dead. They are walking dead. And you're separate from the master. There is indeed a separation. He says you let them bury the dead, but you come follow the ruach. You come follow me. You come follow me. You separate yourselves from the dead. You don't touch dead things. You don't touch dead human beings because that separates you from me. You don't touch sin. You don't touch dead works because that separates you from me. You have no breath. You have no life. You have no ruach in you. And thus, you are without the camp. You're separated from me. You're separated from my dwelling place. Come on, read, little one.
He is unclean, for the water for uncleanness was not sprinkled on him.
Did not the master send his servant by to say that you must wash before marriage? Yes, he has. You must wash before marriage. You must wash. You do not wash, you're still dead. You're still dead. You have no life in you. You have no breath in you. You have no ruach in you. And you're dead and separated from the master. You're separated from him. Read.
His uncleanness is still upon him.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Torah when a man dies in a tent.
Uh-huh.
All who come into the tent and all who are in the tent are unclean for 7 days.
Uh-huh.
And every open vessel which has no cover fastened on it is unclean.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone in the open field who touches someone slain by a sword, or who has died, or a bone of a man, or a burial site is unclean for 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
And for the unclean being they shall take some of the ashes of the heifer, burnt for cleansing from sin, and running water shall be put on them in a vessel. And a clean man shall take hyssop, and dip it in the water, and shall sprinkle it on the tent, and on all the vessels, and on the beings who were there, or on the one who touched a bone, or the slain, or the dead, or a burial site. And the clean one shall sprinkle the unclean on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day. And on the 7th day he shall cleanse himself, and shall wash his garments and bathe in water, and shall be clean in the evening. But the man who is unclean and does not cleanse himself,
Yes.
that being shall be cut off from among the assembly.
That being shall be cut off from among the assembly where the presence of Yahuwah dwell. If that being does not wash himself, if that being does not cleanse himself, he is as one dead. He has no breath in him. He has no life in him. He has no ruach in him, and he is separated from Yahuwah. You must wash. We must wash before marriage. If you do not wash, you have no breath in you. You have no life in you. You have no ruach in you, and you're separate from the master. He will not breathe breath into you. He will not breathe life into you. He will not breathe ruach into you if you have not washed. You are as one dead. You're a dead man or a dead woman walking. You are as one dead. You are as one dead. You're a dead man walking. Hear him. You are a dead man walking, a dead woman walking. You have no life in you. You have no ruach in you. You have no breath in you. Understand, life and breath and ruach are synonymous. They're one. And a body without breath, without life, without ruach, is void of life and is separate from the master. You're separate because you are one as dead, because you're touching that which is dead. Dead things, dead works, and you haven't been washed and cleansed of them. And so you are as one dead. And the master has sent me by to proclaim to his people to let the dead bury the dead. Do not engage in what they're engaging in. Do not touch them. Do not do what they do. Separate yourselves from them and come and follow the master where there is life. Follow the ruach where there is life. Where there is life. Wash, cleanse yourselves so that you may receive life. Come and follow the master. Come on, read, little one.
Because he has devoured the kadosh place of Yahuwah, water for uncleanness has not been sprinkled on him.
You are the kadosh place of Yahuwah, and you have defiled it with your dead works, and you have not washed yourselves and cleansed yourselves in preparation to receive breath, to receive ruach, to receive life. And thus you have defiled his dwelling place. Come on, read, little one.
He is unclean, and it shall be a law for them forever.
Forever. Olam. Olam. There is no end to this law. There is no end to it. Learn the letter in the spirit. There is no end to this law. You remain in dead things. You are as one dead. You remain in your sins. You are as one dead. You have no breath in you. You have no life. You have no ruach. And you are separate from the master. You're separated from him. You are without the camp and separated from him. Thus the master says, separate yourselves from the dead and let them bury one another. But you come and you follow me. You follow ruach. You follow Yahuwah. You follow spirit. Where there is life everlasting. Come on, read, little one.
And the one who sprinkles the water for uncleanness washes his garments. And the one who touches the water for uncleanness is unclean until evening, and whatever the unclean being touches is unclean, and the being who touches it is unclean until evening.
Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah. Line by line, precept upon precept. Here a little, there a little. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Give us another precept, little one.
Hebrews 13, 11 through 15.
Hebrews, Abarim, chapter 13. Which verses?
11 through 15.
Verses 11 through 15. Hebrews, Abarim, chapter 13. Verses 11 through 15. Hebrews, otherwise called Abarim, chapter 13. Verses 11 through 15. Hebrews, otherwise called Abarim, verses 11 through 15. Beginning at verse 11. Come on, read for us, little one.
For the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the Kadosh place
Yes.
by the high priest for sin are burned outside the camp.
Yes.
And so Yahusha also suffered outside the gate.
And so Yahusha also suffered outside the gate as our red heifer, as our offering, as our cleansing from sin, from dead things, from dead works. This is the water of purification. This is the living word, the living water in which we are to wash ourselves, to receive breath, to receive life, to receive ruach. Barak Yahuwah. He is our red heifer. Come on, read.
To Kadosh the people with his own blood.
To Kadosh the people with his own blood. Read.
Let us then go to him outside the camp.
Let us then go to him outside the camp. Let the dead bury the dead, and you come outside the camp and you follow me. Come on, read.
Bearing his reproach, for we have no lasting city here, but we seek the one coming. Through him then let us continually offer up a slaughter offering of praise to Elohim. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name.
Mashiach is HaRuach. Mashiach is HaRuach. He is life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is HaRuach. He is the Ruach. And so he is our red heifer, our cleansing from sins, which is HaRuach, which is the living water. He declares here, you let the dead bury the dead, but you come and you follow me. You come and follow HaRuach, the Ruach of life, the breath of life. You come and you follow me. Otherwise, you have no life in you. Otherwise, you have no breath in you. And you are separated from me. You are as one dead. You are as one dead because you refuse, as in the Torah, to wash and cleanse yourself. You refuse to cleanse yourself and wash yourself. So you are as one dead. Void of Ruach, void of the Father, void of covenant with him, separated from him. He has sent his servant by this night to continue to warn whomever has eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to understand. Wash yourselves and let the dead bury the dead and come and follow Hamashiach. Come and follow the Ruach. The Spirit gives life. Come on, read, little one.
Yeah, Romans 8, 1 through 14.
Romans, line by line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. Barak Yahuwah. Romans chapter 8. Romaim chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. Romaim chapter 8. Which verses, little one?
1 through 14.
Verses 1 through 14. Romaim chapter 8. Verses 1 through 14. Romaim chapter 8. Verses 1 through 14. Romaim chapter 8. Verses 1 through 14. Beginning at verse 1. Come on, read, little one.
There is then no condemnation.
There is now then no condemnation to those, read,
who are in Mashiach Yahusha.
Who are in Mashiach Yahusha, who are in the Ruach, who are in the Ruach, who have breath, who have life, who have Ruach. There is no condemnation to them. Read.
Who do not walk according to the flesh.
Who do not walk according to the flesh. The flesh is dead. Hear him. The flesh is dead. It is a dead one. It is a dead body. The flesh is dead. If you walk in the flesh, you're a dead man. You're a dead woman. You must receive life. You must receive ruach. You must receive breath. And then and only then are you rejoined to the master and covenant with him. And there is no more separation. And there is no condemnation to you. Otherwise, you are outside the camp. You are outside the camp. You are unclean. You are unclean and outside the camp. And you are as one dead. You are as one dead. The condemnation that he speaks of is the sentence of death. The sentence of death. You are indeed a dead man, a dead woman, if you walk according to the flesh. If you have not washed yourself and received the ruach of life, the breath of life, the ruach HaKadosh. Come on, read, little one.
But according to the ruach.
Yes.
For the Torah of the ruach of the life in Mashiach Yahusha.
Yes.
Has set me free from the Torah of sin and of death.
Yes.
For the Torah
has set me free from the Torah of sin and death. Read.
For the Torah being powerless in that it was weak through the flesh. Elohim having sent his own son in the likeness of flesh of sin.
Yes.
And concerning sin.
Yes.
Condemned sin in the flesh.
Yes.
So that the righteousness of the Torah should be completed
so
in
that
us.
The righteousness of Torah, both the sentencing, the judgment, and the obedience of Torah may be perfected in us through his ruach. Through his ruach. We cannot obey Torah in the flesh. And if we do not obey Torah, we are as one dead because we're sinning. We are as one dead because we have not allowed the washing of the word to wash us, so that the ruach of life, so that he will breathe life into us, so that he will breathe ruach into us. Set us free from death. Otherwise, you're a dead man or a dead woman, and you are outside the camp. You are unclean. You are as one dead. You are as one dead. Read, little one.
Who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the ruach. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh. But those who live according to the ruach, the matters of the ruach. For the mind of the flesh is death.
The mind of the flesh is death. The flesh is death. The flesh is dead. It is dead. We must even separate ourselves from our own flesh. And you cannot separate yourself from your own flesh unless you have breath, unless you have ruach, unless you have life. If you don't have breath, ruach, or life, then you're dead. You cannot separate yourself from your flesh. You are dead. You are as one dead. You are unclean, and you are separated from the master. You are without the camp, unclean, and without him, without covenant, without hope, without expectation. Without him. He says, let the dead bury the dead. You come and you follow me. We must even separate ourselves from our own flesh. Come on, read, little one.
But the mind of the ruach is life and shalom, because the mind of the flesh is enmity towards Elohim.
Yes.
For it does not subject itself to the Torah of Elohim.
The mind of the flesh does not subject itself to the Torah of Elohim. Read.
Neither indeed is it able.
Neither indeed is it able. The master has been warning you to wash yourselves, to wash yourselves, to wash yourselves. Yet there is still a sense, a lack of urgency amongst the house of Yasha'al. And most of you, many of you are as dead men walking. As dead men walking. He's only coming for a few in this season. He's only coming from a few who have been resurrected from the dead and have been brought into life. He's only coming for a few. Only a few in this season. He's only coming for a few. Everyone else is without the camp. Most thinking that they're in covenant. Most thinking that they're inside the house. Many thinking because of their genealogy. Many thinking that because of their vain efforts to obey the Torah in their flesh, that they're somehow in covenant with the master. You as a dead man, you're unclean. You have no breath in you. You have no ruach in you. You have no life in you. You refuse to wash yourselves, and you are unclean and outside the camp. Come on, read, little one.
And those who are in the flesh are unable to please Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
But you are not in the flesh, but in the Ruach, if indeed the Ruach of Elohim dwells in you.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone does not have the Ruach of Mashiach,
And if anyone does not have the Ruach of Mashiach, read.
this one is not his.
This one is not his. You a dead man. You a dead man, a dead woman. You're still dead. You're still dead if you don't have his Ruach. You are dead. You're dead. You're without the camp. You are outside the camp because the waters for uncleanness has not cleansed you. You have not been washed in the washing of the word. You have not been cleansed. And if you have not been washed in the washing of the word, it makes no difference if you've been immersed. You're still dead. You're still a dead man. You're still a dead woman. And you're still without the camp because the spirit of the Mashiach has not entered you. The spirit of life has not entered you. And you're still outside of the camp, unclean and without covenant, without, you're outside the presence of the master because you refuse to wash yourself and you're dead. You are as one dead, as a dead, lifeless body without life and without breath. You are dead. Come on, read little one.
And if Mashiach is in you, the body is truly dead on account of sin.
Yes.
But the Ruach is life on account of righteousness.
Yes.
And if the Ruach of him who raised Yahusha from the dead dwells in you,
Come on.
he who raised Mashiach from the dead shall also give life to your mortal bodies.
Do you not understand that each of us must be raised from the dead? Because death entered the world through Adam. And so each of us must be raised from the dead. We are dead things. We're dead, lifeless creatures. Yes, we are. We are dead, lifeless creatures because death entered the world through Adam. And so now we must follow the Torah. We must wash. We must be cleansed from our iniquities. We must be washed by the washing of the word. We must be immersed in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach for the forgiveness of sins. And we must receive his Ruach, his breath, into our lifeless bodies. We must receive his breath into our lifeless bodies to resurrect us. Otherwise, we are dead. Otherwise, we are dead men, dead women. Oh, I pray you understand. We're dead men and dead women without breath in us, without Ruach in us. And he will not give us his Ruach if we have not washed. Come on, read little one.
Through his Ruach dwelling in you.
Yes.
So then, brothers, we are not debtors to the flesh.
We're not debtors to the flesh.
To live according to the flesh.
If indeed you have his Ruach, if indeed you have been raised from the dead, read.
For if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die.
You're going to die. In fact, you're already dead. Read.
But if by the Ruach you put to death the deeds of the body,
you shall what?
You shall live.
You shall live.
For as many as are led by the Ruach of Elohim.
For as many who are led by the Ruach of Elohim, which is the Ruach of Mashiach, read.
These are the sons of Elohim.
These are the sons of Elohim. Thus the Mashiach says, let the dead bury the dead. And you come and follow me. That means to be led. That means to be led by his Ruach. But in order to be led by his Ruach, you have had to be raised from the dead. Raised from the dead, having his breath breathed in you, so that then you can follow him. Then he can lead you as his Torah becomes written upon your heart. Many of you are dead men and dead women because you refuse to wash. You're outside the camp. And this may be your very last opportunity. This coming Feast of Weeks, this coming Shabua'u, this may be your very last opportunity to receive his breath of life, to receive Ruach and live, to receive Ruach and live. Give us another precept, little one.
We have Luke 20, 28 to 38.
Luke 20, verses
28 to 38.
Verses 28 to 38. Luke chapter 20, verses 28 to 38. Luke, the Bashora of Luke, chapter 28 to 38. Luke chapter 20, verses 28 to 38. Luke chapter 20, verses 28 to 38. Beginning at verse 28. Come on, read for us, little one.
Saying, Teacher, Moshe wrote to us that if a man's brother dies having a wife, and he dies childless, his brother should take his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers, and the first took a wife and died childless, and the second took her as wife, and he died childless, and the third took her, and in the same way the 7 also, and they left no children and died, and last of all the woman died too. At the resurrection, then whose wife does she become?
Come on.
For the 7 had her as wife.
Come on.
And Yahusha answering said to them,
Read.
The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage.
Yes.
But those who are counted worthy of attaining that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry, nor are they given in marriage. For neither is it possible for them to die anymore, because they are like messengers and are sons of Elohim, being sons of the resurrection. But the dead are raised. Even Moshe showed at the bush when he called Yahuwah, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Ishkak, and the Elohim of Yaakov.
Come on.
Now he is not the Elohim of the dead.
Now he is not the Elohim of the dead,
but of the living.
But of the living.
For all live to him.
For all live to him. If you are not alive, if you are dead, if you are without the camp, does a dead one who touched a dead human body, had to go outside of the camp. He is not the Elohim of the dead. If you will not receive this ruach, as we read in Romans chapter 8, you do not belong to him. He is not your Elohim. He is not your Elohim. He is not the Elohim of the dead, but of the living. If you do not have his living breath, his ruach in you, he is not your Elohim. He is not your Elohim. I got news for you. If you have not received the breath of life, his ruach the ruach of Yahuwah, not only is he not your Elohim, but Hashatan is your Elohim. Hashatan is your Elohim. He rules the flesh. He is your Elohim. He is the ruler of all the unclean, of all the sons of disobedience. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He dwells in all the sons and daughters of disobedience. He is not the Elohim of the dead. Yahuwah is the Elohim of the living. You are without the camp if you're dead. You are separate from him. You are separate from his dwelling place. You are separate from his presence because you refuse to wash. He's not the Elohim of the dead, but of the living. And if you are not getting this word, the urgency of the word that the master is speaking and proclaiming through his servant, then perhaps you are dead. Perhaps you are already dead. If you don't understand that this may very well be the very last Shabuah, the very last Feast of Weeks, the very last marriage feast in which you have a chance to receive life, to receive breath before judgment comes upon this earth. If you don't have this urgency, if you don't have this sense of urgency and this sense of knowing the time and the place and the muadah, the appointed time that we're in, perhaps dead, you're already dead. Perhaps you're already dead. He is not the Elohim of the dead. He is the Elohim of the living. Come on, read for us, little one.
We have John, the 6th chapter, 30 to 63.
John, the 6th chapter. YAHUAH'S, the 6th chapter. YAHUAH'S, the 6th chapter. John, the 6th chapter. Verses 30 to 63. YAHUAH'S, John, the 6th chapter. Verses 30 to 63. John, YAHUAH'S, the 6th chapter. Verses 30 to 63. Beginning at verse 30. Come on, read for us, little one.
So they said to him, What sign then would you do so that we see and believe you? What would you do?
Read.
Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it has been written.
Yes.
He gave them bread out of the heaven to eat.
Yes.
Therefore Yahushua said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, Masha did not give you the bread out of heaven,
Yes.
but my Father gives you the true bread out of heaven.
Yes.
For the bread of Elohim is he who comes down out of the heaven and gives life to the world.
And gives what?
Gives life to the world.
And gives life to the world. And gives life to the world. If you have not received life, you're a dead man, you're a dead woman, and you are outside the camp. You are outside the camp as one dead and as one unclean. You are outside the camp because you refused to wash yourself. Come on, read, little one.
So they said to him, Master, give us this bread always. And Yahushua said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not get hungry at all, and he who believes in me shall not get thirsty at all. But I said to you that you have seen me and still do not believe. All that the Father gives me shall come to me.
Yes.
And the one who comes to me I shall by no means cast out, because I have come down out of heaven, not to do my own desire, but the desire of him who sent me. This is the desire of the Father who sent me.
Read.
That all he has given me I should not lose of it, but should raise it in the last day. And this is the desire of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him should possess everlasting life.
Should possess everlasting life. If you believe in him, then you will go and follow him and wash yourself and cleanse yourself, and he will give you life. He will give you breath. He will give you ruach. Come on, read, little one.
And I shall raise him up in the last day. Therefore the Yahudim were grumbling against him, because he said, I am the bread which comes down out of the heaven. And they said, Is this not Yahushua, the son of Yahusuf, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I have come down out of the heaven? Then Yahushua answered and said to them,
Read.
Do not grumble with one another. No one is able to come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. And I shall raise him up in the last day. It has been written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by Yahuwah. Everyone then who has heard from the Father and learned comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except he who is from Elohim. He has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you,
Yes.
he who believes in me possesses everlasting life.
He who believes in me possesses everlasting life. If you believe, you will obey. And if you obey, you are washing yourself. And he will give you the breath of life and bring you back into the camp and bring you back into fellowship with him. Come on, read.
I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died. This is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that anyone might eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which comes down out of heaven.
I am the living bread. I am the living bread. I am the living bread that comes down from Shamayim. Read.
If anyone eats of this bread, he shall live forever.
He shall live forever. If anyone eats of this bread, eats of this bread, eats of this bread. In other words, if anyone takes in my ruach, takes in my breath. Come on, read.
And indeed the bread that I shall give is my flesh.
Yes.
Which I shall give for the life of the world.
Yes. If you do not eat him, you have no life in you. You are dead. You are as one dead and unclean because you refuse to wash yourself. Do not think you're going to get this bread. Do not think you're going to eat his flesh. Do not think you're going to get the bread of life, this breath of life, his ruach, if you have not washed yourself. And if you have not washed yourself in accordance with the Torah, Numbers chapter 19, you are unclean and as one dead and outside the camp and separate from the Master Yahuwah. Void of life. A dead, lifeless thing. Read, little one.
The Yahudim therefore were striving with one another, saying, How is this one able to give us his flesh to eat? Yahushua therefore said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Adam and drink his blood, you possess no life in yourselves. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood possesses everlasting life.
Yes.
And I shall raise him up in the last day.
Yes.
For my flesh is truly food,
Uh-huh.
and my blood is truly drink.
Yes.
He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood stays in me,
Uh-huh.
and I in him.
Yes.
As the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father.
Uh-huh.
So he who feeds on me shall live because of me.
Yes.
This is the bread which came down out of heaven.
Uh-huh.
Not as your fathers ate the manna and died.
Mm-hmm.
He who eats this bread shall live forever.
Barak Yahuwah.
He said this in a congregation teaching in Kafar Nakum. Therefore many of his taught ones, having heard, said, this word is hard. Who is able to hear it? But Yahusha, knowing within himself that his taught ones were grumbling about this, said to this, does this make you stumble? What if you see the son of Adam going up where he was before?
Keep reading, little one.
I'm sorry. It is the spirit that gives life. The flesh does not profit at all. The word that I speak to you are Ruach and are life.
Barak Yahuwah. It is the spirit that gives life. The flesh is dead. The flesh profits nothing. That dead body represents you and I, because we're dead because of the crime of Adam, the sin of Adam. Death entered the world. We're all dead. And we must be resurrected to life. All of us must be resurrected to life by his Ruach. We must eat his flesh. We must drink his blood. We must eat the lakam shamayim, the bread from heaven. We must eat it. But we must first wash. We must first follow the Torah. We must first wash. Then be declared clean, and then receive the breath of life, and then receive the Ruach HaKadosh. Otherwise, we are dead, lifeless things. This is about the separation between the dead and the living. This is the separation between the dead and the living. This is the choice that Masha gave to the people in Devarim chapter 30. Yo, I present before you this day life and death. So choose life. What were the conditions of life? That you wash yourselves. That you wash yourselves in the Torah and allow the master to circumcise your hearts via his Ruach HaKadosh, whereby breathing the breath of life into you. If you have not been washed, you're outside the camp. You are unclean. You are as one dead. And you're separated from the master. A dead, lifeless thing. A dead, lifeless thing. Without life, without breath. Come on, read, little one.
We have Ezekiel 37, 1 through 10.
Ezekiel chapter 37. Yakaskal. Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37. Yakaskal. Chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37. Yakaskal. Chapter 37. Verses 1 through 10. Ezekiel Yakaskal. Chapter 37. Verses 1 through 10. Ezekiel Yakaskal. Chapter 37. Verses 1 through 10. Beginning at verse 1. Come on, read for us, little one.
The hand of Yahuwah was upon me, and took me out by the Ruach of Yahuwah,
Yes.
and set me down in the midst of the valley.
Yes.
And it was filled with bones.
It was filled with bones. Come on, read.
And he made me pass among them.
And he made me pass among them.
All around, and see, there were very many.
And see, there were very many bones.
On the surface of the valley.
On the surface of the valley. Read.
And see, they were very dry.
And see, they were very dry. Read.
And he said to me, Son of man, with these bones live. And I said, O Master Yahuwah,
Yes.
you know. Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and you shall say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahuwah.
Hear the word of Yahuwah.
Thus said the Master Yahuwah to these bones.
Thus says the word of the Master Yahuwah to these bones. Read.
See, I am bringing into you a spirit.
See, I am bringing into you a ruach. Read.
And you shall live.
And you shall live. Oh, if you don't have ruach, if you don't have breath, you are as these dry bones. You are dead. You are dead. Do you not understand that you must be resurrected? You are dead. If you do not have this ruach, you are as one dead and unclean. You have no breath. You have no life. You are dead. You are dead, lifeless thing. Read.
And I shall put sinews on you,
Mm-hmm.
and bring flesh upon you,
Uh-huh.
and cover you with skin,
Mm-hmm.
and put a root in you,
Yes.
and you shall live.
And you shall live. Read.
And you shall know that I am Yahuwah.
And you shall know that I am Yahuwah.
And
Read.
I prophesied as I was commanded.
Uh-huh.
And as I prophesied, there was a noise,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a rattling,
Uh.
and the bones came together,
Yes.
bone to bone.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked and saw sinews and flesh come upon them,
Uh-huh.
and skin covered them,
Uh-huh.
but there was no root in them.
But there was no ruach in them. Read.
He then said to me, prophesy to the root,
Yes.
prophesy, son of man, and you shall say to the root,
Uh-huh.
thus said the Master Yahuwah,
Read.
come from the four winds,
Come from the four winds, Yahshua. Read.
and breathe on these killed ones,
And breathe on these killed ones.
so
Read.
that they live.
So that they live.
And I prophesied as he commanded me.
Uh-huh.
And the root came into them.
Yes.
And they lived.
And they live.
And stood upon their feet.
Yes.
A very great army.
A very great army. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Now we know that this speaks to a future time, but don't misunderstand the context. Without ruach, you have no life. Without living water, you are as dry bones. You are as a dead, lifeless thing. You are dead. You are dead. But the Master has sent his servant by this night to speak to the four winds, to the four corners of the Arats, to whomever has eyes to see, and ears to hear, and a heart to understand. Receive breath this night. Wash yourselves. Be cleansed. Wash yourselves and receive breath. Receive breath and live. Be resurrected from the dead. And receive death, and receive breath, and receive life. Otherwise, you are an unclean thing. You are a dead, lifeless thing, and you are outside of the camp. You are outside of the camp, and this may be the very last Feast of Weeks, a Shabua'u, that you have a chance, an opportunity to receive his breath of life before the proverbial flood waters come upon this earth. The hour of trial, YAHUAH'S distress, comes upon this earth. Come on, read for us, little one.
We have John 11:21-44.
John chapter 11. Yahuwah chapter 11. Line by line. Precept upon precept. Here a little. There a little. Let the dead bury the dead. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. If you're touching the dead, you are as one dead. You are unclean. If you're touching sin and crime, which is uncleanness, which is dead works, which is dead things, and you have not washed, then you are a dead, lifeless thing. You are unclean and outside of the camp, separated from the Master, separated from his breath of life, separated from his dwelling place. You are separated. You're separated. Let this urgency sink down deep into your nefesh, deep down into your innermost being, and understand the urgency of this season. Understand this mu'adah, this appointed time, this appointed season. Do not miss your time, your hour of visitation. Do not miss your time and your hour of visitation. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. All things according to Torah. John chapter 11, verses
21-44.
Verses 21-44. Verses 21-44. Beginning at verse 21. Come on, read, little one.
Martha then said to Yahusha,
Yes.
Master, if you had been here,
Yes.
my brother would not have died.
Uh-huh.
But even now I know that whatever you might ask of Elohim,
Yes.
Elohim shall give you.
Yes.
Yahusha said to her,
Yes.
Your brother shall rise again.
Your brother shall rise again. Come
Martha
on.
said to him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection
Uh-huh.
at the last day.
Uh-huh.
Yahusha said to her, I am the resurrection and the life.
I am the resurrection and the life.
He who believes in me,
He who believes in me,
though he dies,
he dies,
he shall live.
he shall live. You already know that this is the story of Al-Azar, commonly called Lazarus, but you need to understand the context. You need to understand what the Master is showing us. He is showing us here that you must be resurrected from the dead in this life, because a sentence of death has been pronounced over all of mankind, and you must be resurrected from the dead in this life. you must receive his ruach. You must go out to him. You must go out to the Hamashiach. You must follow him. You must forsake dead things. You must be washed in the waters for uncleanness. You must allow the washing of the word to wash you. You must receive the living water. You must receive the breath of life. You must receive his Ruach HaKadosh, whereby you will live and whereby you have now been raised from the dead in this life. Otherwise, you are a dead, lifeless thing. Read.
And everyone that is living and believing in me,
yes,
shall never die at all.
Yes.
Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Master, I believe that you are the Mashiach.
Barak Yahuwah, the Master said, I am not the Elohim of the dead, but of the living. But of the living. And so if you believe in him and if you receive his Ruach in this life, he says here what? You will never die. You will never die. He says the same thing in Romans chapter 8. But you've got to be resurrected in this life. The penalty of death has got to be paid in this life. Otherwise, if it has not been paid in you, you are a dead, lifeless thing. You are an unclean thing, separated from the Master. You must receive the breath of life in this life. Otherwise, you are dead. And he is not the Elohim of the dead, but of the living. Come on, read, little one.
The son of Elohim who was coming into the world. And having said this, she went away and called her sister Mariam secretly, saying, the teacher is here and calls you. When she heard, she rose up quickly and came to him. And Yahusha had not yet come into the village, but was in the place where Martha met him. Therefore the Yahudim who were with her in the house and were comforting her, when they saw that Mariam rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, she is going to the tomb to weep there. Mariam, therefore, when she came where Yahusha was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Master, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Yahusha, therefore, when he saw her weeping, and the Yahudim who came with her weeping, he groaned in the rook and was troubled and said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Master, come and see. Yahusha wept. The Yahudim therefore said, see how he loved him. And some of them said, was this one who opened the eyes of the blind not also able to prevent this one from dying? Yahusha therefore, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Yahusha said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who had died, said to him, Master, already he smells, for it is 4 days. Yahusha said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you shall see the esteem of Elohim? So they took away the stone where the dead man was laid. And Yahusha lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But because of the crowd standing by, I said this in order that they believe that you sent me. And when he said this, he cried with a loud voice, Ali Azar, come out. And he who died came out, bound feet and hands with wrappings.
Come on.
And his face was wrapped with a cloth.
Yes.
Yahusha said to them, loosen him and let him go.
Loosen him and let him go. Loosen him and let him go. By now, you should understand that we must be put to death in the flesh, but raised to life in and by the Ruach. We must be put to death. Indeed, the flesh is dead. It is already dead because of the judgment that has been pronounced. But it needs to be carried out in you. And it is carried out in us through him. You already know how this takes place, but you must be washed first. You must be washed first. And we must be put to death in the flesh and raised to life in the spirit. He says to loose him. Loose him from what? Loose him from his flesh. The grave garments are a representation of the flesh. We must be put to death in the flesh and raised to death in and by the Ruach. Otherwise, we have no life in us. Lazarus had no breath in him. He had no life in him until breath, until Ruach entered him. And then he came alive. Thus, unless we have breath, a life, a Ruach in us, and we are raised to life, we are resurrected, the flesh is put to death. We take off, we are loosed of these grave garments called the flesh, and we are raised to life in the spirit, and by the spirit, by the Ruach, then we have no life in us. Then we are still as Lazarus. We are dead, unclean, stinking thing. as the master spoke to the Pharisees, he says, your throats are as an open grave. You are as dead men's bones, because they had no ruach in them. They had no life in them. They were full of the knowledge of the Torah, but they lacked the fruit of the Torah, the fruit of righteousness. They had no ruach in them. Thus the master told them that Abraham was not their father, that the devil was their father, because they had no ruach. They had no life in them. They were full of the letter. They were full of the letter and the traditions and the doctrines of men, but they had no ruach in them. They had no life in them. They were full of religion. They had no breath or life in them. And because they had no breath or life in them, they had no ruach in them, they were dead. They were as dead men's bones. Their throat were as an open grave. And they were children of Hashatan, because he is the mighty one of the flesh. He is the mighty one of death. He is the mighty one of flesh. And those who lack breath, who lack life, who lack ruach, are dead, lifeless things, and they belong to him. The mighty one of death. They belong to him, because they refuse to wash themselves and receive life. Come on, read, little one.
We have John 20, 1 through 7.
John chapter 20. YAHUAH'S chapter 20, verses 1 through 7. John chapter 20. YAHUAH'S chapter 20, verses 1 through 7. John, YAHUAH'S chapter 20, verses 1 through 7. Beginning at verse 1. Come on, read for us, little one.
And on day 1 of the week, Mariam from Magdala came early to the tomb while it was still dark.
Yes.
And saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb.
Yes.
So she ran and came to Shamun Kapha.
Yes.
And to the other taught one whom Yahusha loved.
Yes.
And said to them, they have taken the master out of the tomb.
Yes.
And we do not know where they laid him.
Yes.
Then Kapha and the other taught one went out, and they were going to the tomb, and the two were running together. But the other taught one outran Kapha and came to the tomb first.
Come on.
And stooping down, he saw the linen wrappings laying.
He saw the linen wrappings laying. Come on.
But he did not go in.
Come on.
Then Shamun Kapha came following him and went into the tomb. And he saw the linen wrappings laying, and the cloth which had been on his head not laying with the linen wrappings, but folded up in a place by itself.
He put off the flesh. He put off the flesh. We have to put off the flesh. The flesh has to be put to death. And just like the Hamashiach whom we follow, we must die to the flesh and put off our grave garments and be raised to life by the Spirit and through the Spirit. We must be raised to life by the Ruach and through the Ruach, and put off our grave garments and put off the flesh, which is death. Which is death. The flesh is death. It has an assignment. It has an assignment with death. And thus, the flesh without ruach, the flesh without breath, is a dead, lifeless thing. It is unclean. It is separate from the master. It is separate from Yahusha. It is separate from Yahuwah, our master. It is separate. It is separate. All flesh is unclean. All flesh is unclean. All flesh is dead. And it must be put to death. In fact, it is dead. And we all must be raised to life in Ruach. But we must first be washed. We must first be washed and cleansed by the washing of the word. The flesh must be put to death. And we must be raised to life through and by the Ruach. Come on, read, little one.
1 Peter 3, 18 to 19.
1 Peter 3, verses 18 through 19. 1 Peter 3, verses 18 through 19. 1 Peter 3, verses 18 through 19. Let the dead bury the dead. You come follow me. You come follow the Ruach. Put away your dead things. Put away your flesh. Put away the touching of sin and dead things. And you come and follow me. All things according to Torah. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 18 through 19. Beginning at verse 18. Come on, read, little one.
Because even Mashiach once suffered for sins.
Because even Mashiach once suffered for sins. And we must suffer. We must suffer with him. If you want to reign with him, you got to suffer with him. And you got to die with him. And you got to be buried with him. And you got to be resurrected to the newness of life with him. With him. Otherwise, you're a dead, lifeless thing. Still separated from the master. Still outside of the camp as a dead, lifeless thing. Unclean. Unclean and unwashed. And unwashed. Barak Yahuwah. We must be put to death with him. And buried with him and resurrected to life and with him in the same way. And we must suffer with him. We must be impaled with him and suffer with him in order to reign with him. Come on, read, little one.
The righteous for the unrighteous.
Yes.
To bring you to Elohim.
Yes.
Having been put to death indeed in flesh.
Having been put to death in flesh.
But made alive in the Ruach.
But made alive in the Ruach.
In which also he went and proclaimed unto the Ruchs in prison.
Barak Yahuwah. We have to follow his footsteps, inclusive of dying to the flesh, putting off the flesh, putting off the grave garments, and being raised to the newness of life in the spirit, receiving the breath and the ruach, because we're dead. We're dead, unclean things, lifeless creatures, because of the pronouncement of death that has been pronounced over mankind. We are dead, unclean things. And we must now be washed with the washing of the Torah, of the word. We must be immersed in the name of HaMashiach. We must be immersed in his name, whereby being impaled with him, whereby suffering with him, whereby dying with him and being buried with him and being raised by the Spirit. Being born, not of flesh and blood, but of water and of spirit, of living water, having the living water applied to our dead, dry bones, giving us life so that we are allowed to come back into the camp, no longer being separated from the master, no longer being separated from covenant, no longer being separated from fellowship with him. Come on, read, little one.
You have Genesis 2, 7 to 17.
Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. Barashif chapter 2. Barashif, Genesis chapter 2. Barashif, Genesis chapter 2. Barashif, Genesis chapter 2, verses 7 through 17. Genesis, Barashif, chapter 7, verses 7 through 17. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Genesis chapter 2, verses 7 through 17, beginning at verse 7. Come on, read, little one.
And Yahuwah Elohim formed the man out of dust from the ground.
And Elohim formed man from the dust out of the ground. We're not going to talk about this yet. Read.
And breathed into his nostrils.
And breathed into his nostrils.
Breath of lives.
The breath of lives.
And
breathed into his nostrils the breath of lives. You have no life without ruach. You have no life without breath. Oh, I pray that they understand. You have no life without ruach. You have no life without breath. Read.
And the man became a living being.
And the man became a living being. He lived. He lived because he had breath. He had ruach. Come on, read.
And Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden in Adam to the east, and there he put the man whom he formed.
Yes.
And out of the ground Yahuwah Elohim made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food.
Yes.
With the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Adon to water the garden. And from there it divided and became 4 heads. The name of the first is Pashun. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Ka'awalaha, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. Beldalam is there, and the Shoham stone. And the name of the second river is Gakun. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Kagdakal. It is the one which goes towards the east of Ashar. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. And Yahuwah Elohim took the man and put him in the garden of Adon to work it and to guard it. And Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, eat of every tree of the garden.
And Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, eat of every tree of the garden. Read.
But do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
But do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
For in the day that you eat of it, you shall certainly die.
For in the day that you eat of it, you shall certainly die. You shall certainly die. Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. Verses 1 through 22. Genesis chapter 3. Verses 1 through 22. All things according to the Torah. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Let those who have no ruach, who have no life, who have no breath, let them bury one another. But you come and follow me. You be led by the ruach. You be led by the ruach. And you come and you follow me. Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 22. Beginning at verse 1. Come on, read.
And the Nakash was more crafty than all the lives of the field which Yahuwah Elohim had made.
Yes.
And he said to the woman, Is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the Nakash, we are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim said, do not eat of it nor touch it, lest ye die.
Lest ye die. Read.
And the Nakash said to the woman, you shall certainly not die, for Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. And she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. And they heard the voice of Yahuwah Elohim walking about in the garden in the cool of day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahuwah Elohim among the trees of the garden. And Yahuwah Elohim called unto Adam and said, where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid myself. And he said, who made you know that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded that you should not eat? And the man said, the woman you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And Yahuwah Elohim said to the woman, what is this you have done? And the woman said, the Nakash deceived me, and I ate. And Yahuwah Elohim said to the Nakash, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you are to go, and eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. Bring forth children in pain. And your desires for your husband, and he does rule over you. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, saying, do not eat of it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you return. And the man called his wife's name Kua, because she became the mother of all living. And
thus death entered into the world and was transferred to all mankind. All flesh is dead. All flesh is dead and unclean. It is a dead, lifeless, stinky thing. It is a dead, lifeless, stinky thing, void of life, separated from the Father. It is dead. It must die, and we must be resurrected as new creatures, new creations. Indeed, behold, if any man be in Hamashiach, he is a new creature. He is a new creation. All things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. This penalty of death must be paid in all mankind. In all mankind. It must be paid through the immersion, through our belief in the Master Yahusha. When we are impaled in his name, when we are immersed in his name, we are impaled with him. And then we are buried with him. And we are resurrected to the newness of life. And we are reborn by living water. Living water, receiving the ruach of life, the breath of life. And released from the death sentence. Released from this death sentence. Otherwise, you are a dead, lifeless thing. You must repent. You must teshuvah. You must engage in the washing of the word. You must be immersed in his name. You must receive the ruach of life. Otherwise, this penalty of death, which was pronounced over all mankind, is still applicable to you. You are a dead, lifeless thing, void of covenant, separated from the Father. You are separated from him. You are without the camp. You are without the camp, and a dead, lifeless thing, without breath, without ruach, without life, without life. And you also must understand this. It says here in the text that you are to go to the ground. From out of it you came, and you're going back to it, because the body belongs to the ground. The body belongs to hell. Yes, it does. The flesh belongs to hell. Hell is synonymous with the grave. Sha'ul, or the pit, is synonymous with the grave, depending on what context you use it in. But the flesh belongs to hell. And if the flesh goes to the ground void of breath, void of ruach, the flesh does indeed go to the grave, which is hell, which is Sha'ul, but it also goes to that place of darkness. Or the ruach, rather, also goes, the soul also goes to that place of darkness. The flesh belongs to hell, and it must go back to hell. It must go back to the ground. And so if you adhere to it, if you don't separate from it, you are dead. You are dead. You are a dead man, a dead woman walking. You must separate from it. We must separate from the flesh and all dead things, all sin, all crime. We must separate from it. And we must go out to him outside the camp and wash with the waters of uncleanness. And wash with the waters the waters that are given for uncleanness, which is the washing of the word through our obedience to it. And we must be immersed in his Kadosh name. And then we are to receive his breath. We are to receive life. We are to receive life. Otherwise, there is no life in us. There is no life in us. In the word of the Hamashiach in John chapter 6, otherwise, there is no life in us. There's no breath in us. There's no ruach in us. And a dead, lifeless body, void of ruach, void of breath, Yahuwah being ruach. Being ruach. If you're dead and you're void of ruach, then that means you're separated from him. You're separated from him. You're separated from ruach. So to be dead is to be separated from him. And all flesh is dead because of what happened here in Genesis, the Genesis account. All flesh is dead. And so you must be washed. You must be washed by the washing of the word. You must repent and be washed by the washing of the word. And you must be immersed in the Kadosh name of Yahushua HaMashiach. And you must receive the breath of life. Otherwise you're dead. And this may be the very last opportunity, this coming marriage date, this coming Feast of Weeks, this coming Shabu'u. This may be the very last chance to enter into covenant with the Master, to receive the breath of life before he turns the water off. Before he turns the water off. And before the proverbial flood waters come upon this earth. We're almost done here. Read, little one.
And Yahuwah Elohim made coats of skin for the man and his wife and dressed them. And Yahuwah Elohim said, see, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever.
Barak Yahuwah. I think I have a note there. What does it say, little one?
All flesh has a judgment of death upon it.
That's right. Repeating that. All flesh has a judgment of death upon it. All flesh has a judgment of death upon it. Read.
It is dead. It belongs to hell.
It is dead. All flesh is already dead. You're a dead man, a dead woman walking if you're void of ruach, if you're void of breath. You're a dead man, a dead woman walking, and you belong to hell. The body, indeed, again, the flesh belongs to hell. The Master proclaimed it. He said, you're going back to the ground. You're going to the grave. You're going to hell. The flesh is going to hell. Yes, it is. It belongs to it. The flesh belongs to Hashatan. It belongs to Hashatan. The flesh belongs to him. Thus, the flesh is going to hell. Come on, little one.
Hell is synonymous with the grave.
Barak Yahuwah. Hell is synonymous with the grave. Hell is synonymous also with the pit. Give us another precept, little one.
Acts 2, 37 to 39.
Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. Verses 37 through 39. 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 Beginning at verse 37. Read, little one.
And having heard this, they were pierced to the heart.
And having heard this, the words of Kapha, proclaiming to them the words of prophecy. Read.
And said to Kapha and the rest of the emissaries, Men, brothers, what shall we do?
Men, brothers, what shall we do? Read.
And Kapha said to them, Repent.
Repent, teshuvah, wash. Be washed in the washing of the word. Turn from Torahlessness back to Torah. Turn from crime, from sin, back to righteousness. Read.
And let each one of you be immersed in the name of Yahushua Mashiach.
And let each of you be immersed in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. The master's already gone over this. Read.
For the forgiveness of sins.
For the forgiveness of sins. We must be immersed in his name for the forgiveness of sins, because without the remission of blood, there is no remission of sin. Without the shedding of blood, rather, there is no remission of sin. There must be bloodshed. There must be death. There must be death. And the master has allowed us now, by belief, to die with the HaMashiach, to be impaled with him, thus to die with him and to be buried with him and to be resurrected to the newness of life, thus having this penalty that was pronounced over mankind in the very beginning, the penalty of death, being paid in us through belief in the master HaMashiach. Otherwise, we're still dead. Following this process, again, as the master spoke this past Shabbat, we must follow this process. Otherwise, we're still dead men and dead women walking. Dead men and dead women walking, void of life, void of breath, void of ruach, void of covenant with the master. What's the next step, little one?
And you shall receive the gift of the Kadush Ruch.
And you shall receive the gift of the Kadush Ruch.
For the promise is to you and to your children.
For the promise is to you and to your children.
And to all who are far off.
And to all who are far off.
As many as Yahuwah our Elohim shall call.
For as many as Yahuwah our Elohim shall call. When receiving the Ruach, this is a resurrection. This is the resurrection from the dead. This is a resurrection from the dead. This is dying to the flesh and being raised to life in Ruach. By the Ruach and through the Ruach, being raised to life through him and by him. Otherwise, that penalty of death is still applicable, and we're still dead men, dead women. We're still unclean things. We're still dead, lifeless things. And we're still, according to the Torah, separated from the master. We are outside of the camp, separated from the master, because we refuse to wash. By the washing of the word, we refuse to repent from sin and turn back to Torah, whereby allowing the washing of the word to wash us through our obedience to it. If this does not occur, we're still dead, lifeless things outside the camp, And the master has sent me by to tell his people, to speak to his people, to put away your flesh, put away dead, lifeless things. Let the dead bury the dead. Let the dead bury the dead. Let the dead bury the dead, and you come and follow the HaMashiach. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. Come on, read, little one.
Romans 6, 1 through 3.
Romans 6, verses 1 through 3. Romans 6, verses 1 through 3. Romans 6, verses 1 through 3. Romans 6, verses 1 through 3. Beginning at verse 1. Come on, read, little one.
What then shall we say?
What then shall we say?
Shall we continue in sin?
Shall we continue in sin?
To let favor increase?
To let favor increase.
Let it not be.
Let it not be.
How shall we who died to sin still
How
live
shall
in it?
we who have died to sin? I told you death is required because death was pronounced over mankind. How shall we who have died from sin still live in it? Come on, read.
Or do you not know that as many of us
Or do you not know that as many of us
as were immersed into Mashiach Yahusha
who were immersed into who were immersed into Yahushua HaMashiach
were immersed into his death?
were immersed into his death. Were immersed into his death. We must die. The flesh must die. It must die, and we must be resurrected to the newness of life by his ruach, by his breath. Otherwise, the flesh is dead. It is a dead, lifeless thing. Void of life, void of breath, void of ruach, void of the ruach hakadosh, and separated from the master, outside of the camp, having no life, having no expectation. Come on, read, little one.
Yeah, Revelation 14, 1 through 5.
You don't have 2 Corinthians 6 there, little one?
Yeah, I got this, but I can read it. 2 Corinthians 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, 6, 14.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and read. Go ahead and read Revelation.
Okay, bro.
Go ahead and read Revelation. It's all good. We're amongst family.
All right.
We're amongst family. They know I'm kind of challenged right now.
That's
Rock
okay.
Yahuwah. Rock Yahuwah. Go ahead and read Revelation.
Uh,
Revelation chapter 14. Revelation chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. 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 Beginning at verse 1. Come on, read, little one.
And I looked and saw a lamb standing on Mount Zion,
And I looked and saw a lamb standing on Mount Zion,
and with him 144,000,
and with him 144,000,
having his father's name written upon their foreheads.
having the Father's name written upon their foreheads, meaning that they were dwelling places. Meaning that they were dwelling places, meaning that they had been resurrected. They have been resurrected from the dead. They have died to the flesh and have resurrected from the dead to the newness of life. They have been raised by the Spirit and through the Spirit to the newness of life, and are now dwelling places of Yahuwah, having his name written upon their foreheads. Because where his name is, he dwells. Where his name is, this is where he dwells. Read.
And I heard a voice out of the heaven, like the voice of many waters,
Yes.
and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps, and they sang a renewed song before the throne, and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. And no one was able to learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth.
Who were redeemed from the earth. Now, we've talked about this before, that redeemed or ransomed from the earth. That earth in Hebrew or Abari is the word aratz. And aratz means earth, it means soil, and it means land. We're talking about first fruits, being first fruits from the soil, being firstborn from the soil, being resurrected from the soil, being resurrected from the soil by ruach, being resurrected from the soil. These are those whom we find in Revelation chapter 2, guarding the word of endurance. Being tired, having little power left, yet they're guarding the word of endurance and not denying his name. These are those who are resurrected to life in this season, who have put to death the flesh, and who have resurrected, who have been raised to life through and by the Ruach, and who have been resurrected from the soil as first fruits, as firstborn, and brought to Mount Zion. Read.
There are those who were not defiled with women.
These are those who are not defiled with women. So in other words, they're not following other mighty ones. Come on.
For they are maidens.
For they are maidens.
They are those following the Lamb wherever he leads them on.
They are those following the Lamb wherever he leads them on. Thus the Master says, let the dead bury the dead. And you come and you follow me. You come and you follow me. These are those who are led by the Ruach. The Ruach is the master, who are led by the Ruach and who follow him, as we read in Romans chapter 8, for those who are led by the Ruach HaKadosh, by Yahushua HaMashiach. These are the sons of Elohim. These are the sons of Elohim. These have been resurrected and have received the Ruach of life, have put to death the works of the flesh, have put to death the unclean thing, have put to death the unclean thing, have washed themselves, and have received the Ruach of life, and have been resurrected. And we find them here on Mount Zion, singing a song, that no one else can sing. Come on, read, little one.
They were redeemed from among men.
They were redeemed from among men,
Being first fruits to Elohim.
being first fruits to Elohim
And to the Lamb.
and to the
And
Lamb.
in their mouth was found no falsehood.
In their mouth was found no falsehood, because the Torah is written upon our hearts. To the Torah and the testimony. And if they do not speak according to this word, there is no light in them. There is no falsehood in them, because the Torah is written upon their hearts. Come on, read.
For they are blameless before the throne of Elohim.
They are blameless. They are perfect. They walk perfect and upright before Yahuwah, because the Torah is written upon their hearts, and because they have been raised to life. They have been put to death in the flesh, and they've been raised to life in Ruach, whereby they have been given the power to be perfect. They have been given the power to be perfect, and they've been given a love and a willingness and an ability to obey his righteous Torah. Come on, read, little one.
We have a note. Behold, he does a great separation.
Yes, the Master is doing a great separation in the earth. He's doing a great separation right before our eyes. He is separating the living from the dead. Yes, he is. He is separating the living from the dead. He is separating the firstborn from above, from the firstborn from below. There is a great separation going on in the earth. As this thing manifests right before our eyes, there are many differences now that are separating us. Many differences that are separating us. It is causing hate and dissension, and it is causing brother to hate brother, and it's causing brother to slander brother, and sister to slander sister. It's causing brother to kill brother, sister to kill sister. But behold, the Master, if you have eyes to see, is doing a great separation in the earth. Even if they're not doing these things, there is still a great separation going on if you have eyes to see. Behold, he is doing a great separation. A great separation in this time. Separating a few. A remnant within a remnant. Of those who have been put to death in the flesh. And who have been raised to life in the Ruach. And who are walking according to the Ruach. Who are following the Master's voice wherever he leads them. Who are letting the dead bury the dead, who are separating themselves from dead things and dead people, and who are separating themselves from their own dead flesh. And who are following the voice of the Master, turning neither to the right or to the left of his voice, following his voice, following the living Torah wherever he leads them, being identified as sons of Elohim because they are being led by him. They are being led by the Ruach. Indeed, there's a great separation going on. There's a great separation going on in the earth. There is a great separation. The Master is making it very plain and very clear for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. But for those whom he has separated, Barak Yahuwah, he has a warning for us. He has a warning. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18. Beginning at verse 14. Come on, read, little one.
Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers.
Do not become unevenly yoked with those who are dead. With those who are dead. Read.
For what partnership has righteousness and lawlessness?
For what partnership has righteousness and lawlessness?
And what fellowship has light with darkness?
And what fellowship has light with darkness?
And what agreement has Mashiach with Belial?
And what agreement has Mashiach with Belial?
Or what part does a believer have with an unbeliever?
Or what part does a believer have? One who is alive. One who is alive. What partnership or what in common does one who is alive have with one who is dead? Read.
And what union has the dwelling place of Elohim with idols?
And what union has the dwelling place of Elohim with idols? Read.
For you are a dwelling place of the living Elohim.
For you are a dwelling place of the living Elohim.
As Elohim has said, I shall dwell in them.
As Elohim has said, I will dwell in them.
And walk among them.
And walk among them. You're no longer separated from me. You're no longer separated from my dwelling place. You are no longer a dead unclean, lifeless thing, separated from the dwelling place, and separated from the camp, and separated from me. Read.
And I shall be their Elohim.
And I shall be their Elohim.
And they shall be my people.
And they shall be my people.
Therefore come out from among them.
Therefore come out from among them.
And be separate.
And be separate.
Says Yahuwah.
Says Yahuwah.
And do not touch what is unclean.
Don't touch the dead thing.
And I shall receive you.
And I shall receive you. Do not touch the dead things. Forsake your dead works. Do not touch the dead things. Forsake even the dead works of this flesh. Forsake even this flesh. Forsake it. Forsake it. Touch not the unclean thing. Touch not the dead thing. If you touch the dead thing, you are as one unclean. As we read in Numbers chapter 19, if you touch the dead thing, if you touch that is unclean, you are as one dead. You are as one unclean. You are a dead, lifeless thing separated from without the camp. And so, unlike ever before, we've got to guard ourselves. Those who have been reborn, we have to guard ourselves from touching the unclean thing, from touching the dead thing, lest we too be as a dead, unclean thing. Come on, read.
And I shall be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says Yahuwah the Almighty.
Rock Yahuwah. Read, little one.
Numbers 16, 25 to 33.
Number 16.
That's the last one. Yeah.
Number 16. This is the last precept. We're almost done. Number 16. Numbers chapter 16. Numbers chapter 16. But Matbar chapter 16. Numbers chapter 16. But Matbar chapter 16. Which verses, little one?
25 to 33.
Verses 25 to 33. Numbers Bamidbar chapter 16, verses 25 to 33. Beginning at verse 25. Read for us, little one.
So Moshe rose up and went to Dathan, and Abram and the elders of Yasharal followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, please turn away from the tents of those wrong men.
Please turn from the tents of those wrong men. Turn from the tents of those dead men. Of those dead men. Read.
Do not touch whatever belongs to them.
Do not touch what is unclean. Read.
Lest you be consumed in their sins.
Lest you be consumed with these dead men. Read.
Then they moved away from around the tents of Korach, Dathan, and Abram. And Dathan and Abram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives and their sons and their little children. And Moshe said, by this you know that Yahuwah has sent me to do all these works, that they are not from my own heart. If these die as all men do, or if they are visited as all men are visited, then Yahuwah has not sent me. But if Yahuwah creates what is unheard of, and the earth opens his mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Shaul, then you shall know that these men have scorned Yahuwah. And it came to be, as he ended speaking all these words, that the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the men with Korach, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into Shaul, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly.
Move away from their tents. Move away from the tents of these dead men. Move away from the tents of dead men, of dead things, of sin and crime and unclean things. Move away from the tent of dead men, of dead things, dead people. Move away from your flesh, lest you be consumed with it. Lest you be consumed with it. The Master is calling for us to move away from their tents, to move away from dead, unclean things, and be washed, and be cleansed, and be immersed in the name of the Master Yahusha, and receive the Ruach HaKadosh, whereby being invited back into the camp, whereby being brought near once again in covenant to the Master Yahusha, to the Master Yahuwah, in which this coming Shabu'ah, this coming Feast of Weeks, may very well be the last opportunity before the proverbial floodwaters come upon this earth. For those who are in the nations, and for those who are listening here live via Zoom, for you to enter into covenant with the Master via receiving the breath of life, via receiving his Ruach HaKadosh. Do not allow this hour of visitation, this time of visitation to pass. Put away your dead things. Put away your dead things. Turn away from these tents. Move away from these tents. Move away from dead things. Move away from dead people. Move away from unclean things. Move away from them. Let the dead bury the dead. Let the dead bury the dead. And you come and you follow the Mashiach. You receive his Ruach and you come and follow him. Let the dead bury the dead. All things according to Torah. I believe I have a note there, little one.
Yes, you do. We must separate ourselves from all that is dead.
Indeed, we must separate ourselves from all that is dead.
Including our dead flesh.
Including this dead flesh.
Death is about to come to the earth.
Death, listen, hear him. Death is about to come to the earth.
He is going to put on flesh and reign for 3.5 years.
Death, Hashatan, is going to put on flesh and reign for 3.5 years. Death is getting ready to come to this earth. Death, unlike the earth has ever seen before, is getting ready to come to this earth when death puts on flesh and comes to this earth. If you are dead, if you are as one dead and unclean, you belong to him. You belong to death. And you will be here. You will remain when he comes. But if you have now already been resurrected to life, you no longer belong to him. You do not belong to him. So that when the water is turned off, when the living water is turned off, when the breath is removed from the earth, we too will be removed with it. Read, little one.
We must build his house with living stones.
We must build the Master's house in this season with living stones. There is no room for dead stones in this house. We must build this house with living stones. We must build this house with living stones.
While there is still time.
While there is still time.
When death comes to the earth.
When living death, when death manifested in flesh, he is death, comes to the earth.
Life or Ruach will be removed.
Life, Ruach, will be removed from the earth.
If those days are not shortened.
And if those days are not shortened.
No flesh will
remain. No flesh is going to remain. No flesh is going to remain. Hear his voice. If you hear him today, harden not your heart. Harden not your heart. Be washed. Teshuvah, repent. Return back to Torah. Wash in the washing of the word. Be immersed in his Kadosh name. Receive the Ruach HaKadosh. Be resurrected from the dead, and be raised to life by the Spirit, by the Ruach, and live. And live. You may not have another opportunity, before death comes to the earth and manifests in the person of Hashatan. Come on, little one. What did I say?
Vampires, otherwise known
Barak
as the living
Yahuwah.
dead.
Barak Yahuwah. Listen, Mashpaka. Listen. Vampires. This is that discernment thing, and this is what the Master is calling us to. He's calling us to separate and to recognize the separation between the living and the dead. The living and the dead. And he's calling us to separate from the dead, to let the dead bury the dead, and to come follow him. Indeed, vampires, otherwise known as the living dead. Hear him. Vampires, otherwise known as the living dead, pretend quite often as though they are living. They can pretend that they are of the living, and they pretend so as to get next to you, so as to get next to us. There are those among us who are vampires. They are pretending to be among the living when they are in fact the living dead. And they are pretending to get next to you so that they can suck the life out of you. Indeed, the life of the creature is his blood. The blood is also a representation of Ruach. Thus, if we do not eat of his flesh and drink of his blood, we have no life in us. And they pretend to have life in them so that they can get next to us, to suck the life out of us, to draw the life out of us. This is the intent. They are sent by the adversary They are pawns of the adversary, and they are living amongst us. They are living amongst us. They are walking amongst us. The living dead are walking amongst us, and they are here for the express purpose of sucking and draining the life out of us. That's their purpose. That's their purpose. And so you must be discerning. You must have your eyes wide open. You must be sensitive to the voice of the Ruach. You must be sensitive to his Ruach. You must be led by him. And if you're led by him, he will reveal those vampires amongst us. He will reveal them. He will reveal them to you so that you're cautious. So that you're cautious and that you don't leave your neck exposed. So that you don't leave your neck exposed. What else did I write, little one?
Those who have life will pour life into you.
Those, listen, we're talking about that separation between life and death. Those who have life will pour life into you. Those who have life will pour life into you. Those who do not life will only suck life from you. They will only suck life from you. Those who have life will pour life into you. Those who do not have life will only suck life from you. Therefore, let the dead bury the dead. Let the dead bury the dead. Turn away from the unclean. Turn away from the unclean. Follow the command of the Torah. Follow the command of the Torah, because the Torah declares that we are dead. We are dead. We're dead in our trespasses. We were dead in our trespasses if you in fact have been born, reborn of life, reborn of Ruach. But the Torah declares that we are dead. We are dead. And the Torah declares that we are outside the camp. We're outside the camp as dead, unclean, stinky, lifeless things. The Torah declares that we must wash, that we must teshuvah, that we must wash, and that we must wash by the washing of the word, which is to say, to turn and to obey the Torah. We must be immersed in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. We must receive his Ruach, which is breath, which is life. If we want to live, we must receive life. We must receive his breath. Otherwise, we are dead, lifeless things. Master Yahuwah, I thank you for giving your servant the strength, not by power, not by might, but by your Ruach, because your servant is tired. Your servant indeed is tired. But I serve, Master. I pour out all that I have unto you and unto your people. So this evening, not by power, not by might, but by your Ruach. And I pray as the power of the Ruach has gone forth, and as it is written, it is the anointing that destroys the yoke. That yokes were destroyed this night. That chains were shattered this night. That bonds were broken this night. That hardened grounds were broken up this night. So that the seed that was scattered this night will, that fertile ground of the heart and of the mind will be conducive to the planting of the engrafted word in their hearts. So that your living water of the Ruach HaKadosh will come and water that seed, so that it grows to become a mighty tree, producing the fruit that leads to everlasting life. It is my prayer, my Master, that not one word, that no one seed of this word returns void to you, but that it goes forth and accomplishes that which you have sent it forth to do. It is my prayer that not one seed has been thrown by the wayside, that not one seed has been thrown on shallow ground, that not one seed has been thrown amongst thorns, but that this seed indeed has been scattered amongst fertilized soil, tilled soil, as the tiller went forth this night. As you went forth and placed my hand on the plow, and as the ground was tilled this night in the soil of some, it is my prayer that this seed will indeed take root and grow deep and produce the fruit that leads to everlasting life. In the name of the Master Yahusha, I pray. So be it. So be it. So be it. To those of you who are on YouTube, we're grateful once more that the Master has sent you our way. We pray that you're getting the urgency of this message, of these messages, and that you're discerning the urgency of this time and of this season. and that you are recognizing the dead works, the dead things in you, and understanding that dead things, dead works, separate us from the Master. If you're still operating in this, you are a dead thing. You are a lifeless thing. You are unclean. You're separated from him. You're without the camp. A dead thing, a dead body has no breath. It has no life. It has no ruach. And unless you have its ruach, you have no life in you. And if you're touching dead things, and if you have not washed, if you refuse to wash, you refuse to repent and turn back to Torah, whereby allowing the washing of the word to cleanse you, then you're disobeying Torah, and you're still outside of the camp, and there is no life in you. I pray that this word has edified you. I pray that it has encouraged you. I pray that it has cut as a two-edged sword, that it is cut deep, cutting both bone and marrow, going deep to the cutting to the innermost being, to your innermost being, to your kilyah, to even your secret things, that it's cut you going in and coming out. We invite you again to listen to us, to tune in, to listen to Abba, to listen to his voice being spoken through his servant. And once again, if you desire to join us live, our contact information is in the channel description. But until the next time, Yahuwah barak you and guard you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and show favor unto you.
Yes,
Yahuwah lift up his face upon you and give you shalom. Thus you shall put my name on the children of Yasha'al, and I myself shall barak them. So be it, so be it, so be it. Shalom.
Shalom.